And we are back. Yes, you would have to use a list to have the add method. When they basically rebuilt the what's it called, the collections framework, they added in all of the generic collection setups and migrated some of the features that used to sit on arrays back in the day over to those objects instead. I'm, for the most part, partial to using regular old school arrays and manipulating those because old school arrays generally have a smaller footprint than the collection objects have. Granted, there are some instances where those collection objects definitely are a benefit, especially if you don't want to do a shit ton of manipulation and handling of your array. For simple things like these, I tend to prefer using the array over the collection objects, simply because well, if I need to move such lists across multiple different objects, across multiple different forms, it is usually a lot faster simply moving the array than it is moving an object that has a bigger footprint. Um, But again, that's one of those preference discussions. So I'm not going to say that this is the right way to do it. This is the way I choose to do it. Whether you want to adopt it or not, that's completely and entirely up to you. Do whatever is is the best fit for your project. So yes, it is because it's handled differently. Okay, so we kind of want to see if we can sort these profiles by time of day. So for that, we need to look at, let's see, schedule profile. We need to look at the event hour and the event minute in order to sort these according to time of day. And since we're using 24-hour setups for this instead of 12 hours, that should be fairly straightforward. All right, so how can we do this? If we were to employ, say, a list, we could simply just use some of those nice lambda settings or link settings options available to us to do that. But that doesn't exactly teach us how to go through sorting things. So how was it done back in the day before we got those features available to us? Well, a couple of loops takes care of such a problem. Since we are messing with a very small array, typically we would maybe have 4 or 5 entries at most in a schedule list like this. So it doesn't really matter if we have to loop through the array a couple of times to see which order we have to put things in. It's something that we can very quickly and easily do, so it shouldn't be a huge issue. All right, so since we kind of need to build up a way of doing this sorting, we can go about it a couple of different ways. The way we are going to do it here is that we will simply do another local array and store the entries in the local array whenever we need to move them. Yes. bubble sorts were in fashion and so on and so forth. The reason you might get fired if you choose to do it is simply because there are so many other options available for doing these things. But that doesn't negate the fact that it is nice to know how to do it. Um, in some situations, you might not have all of those modern features available to you, and you may need to go through and do things old school to accomplish the task. Um, so it's always good to at least have some knowledge of how some things might have been done in the past, or how some things can be done in case that particular feature isn't available to you. Um, at the end of the day, you are only as strong as your capabilities within the code, not the libraries that you can include. Um, if you become too reliant on libraries for a ton of different things to be able to accomplish a given task, then that overall diminishes your capabilities with the code. So in some respects, we should still pay some credit to how things were done back in the day, because in any case, it's still yes, that's pretty much the way it went. Um, but yeah, okay. So um, we were going to actually, you know what? Let's see if we can do this a different way. We know that we need to take a look at event hour and event minute. Those are the primary factors for building our little sort here. There are a bunch of different ways we can go about this. We can say loop through all 24 hours looking for a schedule that matches. We can loop through the existing schedules and store a list of whatever hours might be in there. If we do that, we may want to check whether the hour of the current schedule already exists in that list, then use a numeric sort to sort the hours, and then loop through them again to find the hours, and do the same for minutes. Different ways we can go about this. Um, so let's see. Just because I choose to do so, we'll just simply loop through the hours and find the ones that we want to add in. Let's see, the event hour. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the which way I should do this. Yeah, nah, we'll just we'll go. Yeah, we'll do this temp new. Grab one of these, stuff that up there. We'll see how this turns out. Okay. Let's do a check on the hours first. And then we'll see, not 34, 24, and then we'll go through and see what we can find. Well, that's one of the kind of interesting questions in regards to doing this. Some may find that doing an in-place sorting by swapping entries can be difficult to comprehend because you are effectively searching through the list, finding the entries, and then generating a, in effect, new index list, and then doing the replacements or swappings, while others think that building a new array of the old one is equally incomprehensible. It's all a matter of, again, personal choice in terms of footprint spendage. The in-place sorting is at all times the interesting one to use because it overall has a far smaller memory footprint because you're only swapping individual entries and not rebuilding the entire setup basically as a copy of the original one. Whether we use one or the other doesn't really matter for this because of how small this particular setup potentially is. But we can definitely do the yeah, that would be the link way of doing it. However, I have found that it is somewhat finicky getting it to sort on two properties using link. It doesn't always sort correctly for whatever reason. I might be going wrong when I'm trying to set it up, but since we need to sort on two properties, no, exactly, it doesn't. We need to sort on two properties, and it doesn't exactly show how things were done back then. Okay, so let's see. Well, let's just for the moment do the yeah. All right. Let's see. For the moment, let's just do things. Um, let's see. That's an integer, if I remember right. Yeah, it is. All right. Okay, we'll go through and do the this way. All right, so let's go through these and see if we can find any hours that might match. Don't live in the past. True. Absolutely true. Okay. In that case, let's see. Well, of course you need to be aware of history, but you definitely don't want to live in the past. That's also true. Let's see, how would you go about sorting our schedule array using link and sorting on two properties, one of them called event hour, the other one called event minute? Yep. Newer and better. ways of implementing a sorting function, which are preferred over this implementation any day. There we go. Now we've put some sort key. Yes. Yeah. Check each schedule profile for a matching hour, event hour. If a match is found, yes. Well, basically yes, or alternatively you could just actually, why don't we do that? Do it that way. Let's just, I'll show you. Okay, so this will be our sorting reference. We'll loop through the schedules as less than these, and then we'll see if well, we'll make use of the actually we'll do this, and I'll show you minutes. There we go. Okay, so yeah, that should take care of the sorting. Let's see if we can actually employ that order by. Event hour times 60 plus, whoops, event minute. There we go. That should take care of it. This should take care of ordering it correctly. Yeah, if we needed to reverse the order. Well, I have had colleagues bash me for a lot of different reasons, which I won't go into. Whoops, that's not what I wanted, that's what I wanted. quick and easy way of performing the sort. There we go. We'll leave it in here. Okay, so here we're looping through all the profiles that we've got, and then we'll simply add all of the that shouldn't be necessary if yeah, we probably need to. Like so. Okay. All right, so now one nifty feature that we'll get to that. We'll loop through the current schedule profiles, and then we'll add unique hours and unique minutes to them. And then we'll rebuild it in a copy like we did back in the day, and then take it from there. So first of all, we need to see if the current profile's event hour is already in the hours list. So to do that, we'll do we'll need a couple of we need to figure out whether it's in there or not. We'll do a like this, and then we'll set it to false. There we go. Let's check the hours. Less than hours length, and see if it's in there. If hours equals the current event hour, then we found it, and we can break. Now, if this wasn't found, then we need to add the event hour to the hours list. So that means the array resize. Add 1 to the length of it, and then add it to the last position, which would be this one. There we go. All right, so now we've added it to the current list of unique hours, and then basically we need to do the same for the minutes, and this will then give us a unique list of hours and a unique list of minutes set up for these profiles. Then we can sort those, loop through them, and either do a replace or a swap, or just build it up in a new array and then copy them over. So there we go. Do this for the minutes. We need to reset the found flag regardless. So we'll loop through the minutes, which would be less than the minutes. There we go. And then see if the minutes has an entry that's equal to the current profile's minute setup. Yes. If we found it here, then we don't need to add it, so we'll do the found and break out of it again. No point in continuing the loop. We'll get to that. All right, so this now builds up a list of hours and a list of minutes. Just because I'm lazy, I'll make use of the built-in sort mechanism for hours that sorts them in ascending order, so lowest number first. And we'll do the same for minutes. There we go. So now we have a set of unique hours and a set of unique minutes. And next part would then be to loop through the profiles and find profiles that match a combination of the current number with some specific setup of the minutes. So for the moment we will do a schedule profile, call this temp, schedule. For some reason it started lagging a little bit. Oh well, there we go. Alright, so we know that we have X number of unique hours. We have Y number of unique minutes. To make sure that we get things set up in the correct order, we'll start by looping through the hours that we found and sorted. So less than the length of hours. There we go. Like so. And then we basically need to yes, it would probably have been easier storing it as a time span, but well, whatevs. Yes, exactly. Um, in any resource calculation, whenever you have a loop, you should always try to see if you can reduce the number of times that particular loop has to execute. And that is something that is highly required when doing some kind of sorting or organizing. Um, so that of course means we need to loop through the minutes again. Um, less than minutes length. Whoops, that should be an M. There we go. Oh yeah. Well, in reality, I would most likely go with this one. Easier, faster, whatever. I don't have to code so much. But I find it interesting. Um, I find it interesting to go through building things. How should I put this? The manual way, just to kind of give an impression of how complex it was doing these things back in the day, and to give an idea of, or at least some measure of understanding of how sorting code actually works. Today we have so many available methods for sorting data as part of our high-level language that we don't really think about how sorting is actually done anymore. Um, and to be honest, I think that that is an art form that, at least to some extent, should be remembered. Exactly. So, all right. In terms of how should I put this? In terms of keeping the actual processing cost a little bit further down, we could utilize a further trick, which again stems back to the day when we had to do um, um, memory management ourselves. Um, true, absolutely true. Um, it does take up a bit of processing power to resize an array on the fly, like we potentially would need to do here, we could cheat a little bit by pre um, creating the new array at the same length and then simply using a pointer or indexer to keep track of which new entry we need to put stuff into. Um, it it does make a difference. Resizing an array at any point always has a greater cost than having a pre-created array of equal length and then simply just changing the indexing of the new array. So we'll do a target index of -1 here. There we go. Okay. This then eliminates the need to resize the array any further while populating the sorted list. Okay, so when we get at this point, we kind of need to look through the old list to see if we can match an hour and a minute set with what's in the old schedule list. So of course we need to loop through that again. And that would be the length of this one, and then see if we can match it up. And if this particular entry's event hour equals that one, and absolutely, I am cheating a little bit, and I did say so. I'm going to cheat a little bit by utilizing these so I don't have to rewrite them. Sorting numbers is, well, it's basically the same process as what we've been doing previously, so I figured it would be okay to cheat there. The minute. Then we have an actual entry. Actually, that would be it. There we go. We found one that matches. All right, so we found a schedule entry that matches the hours minutes combination. So we'll add this entry to the new list and tag the old one as done. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to cheat a little bit. And of course there's a lot of cheating in code. Most of what you do in code is cheating. All right, so first of all, we need to increment the target index because or rather, we need to check whether we need to add this. Oh, we'll do that. Don't worry. We'll do some testing and some debugging and showing exactly what's going on here. I actually plan to step through this once we create a second schedule in the dialog, and then we can keep track of the watches and see exactly what happens. All right, so one of the ways that we can cheat here is by effectively setting event hour and event minutes for a already spent schedule profile outside the normal hours and minutes settings. And the easy way of doing that is simply just setting them to -1. That effectively puts it outside the test range of these setups. So here we'll need to increment the target index. So we are pointing to a new entry within the temp array. So this one should then be equal to the current one, which is this one. And then we will set the current one, event hour to -1 should be sufficient. And then we will break out of this loop. We found an entry, so there's no point in continuing through the loop. We have one that matches, so we don't care about the rest. There we go. And then it effectively jumps back to the minute setup and attempts to find the next one that matches. So when this entire run through of unique hours and minutes as defined by the profiles themselves has completed, we have actually managed to iterate through a lot of timestamps with a very few amount of loop iterations. So that's pretty straightforward. Next, how should I put this, measure of cheating is to utilize the array copy method, because at this point we basically only need to copy the contents of temp over to the contents of the mvar schedule profiles, because the temp would now contain the sorted setup. So to cheat, we'll use the array copy, grab the temp at the first index, copy it to the schedule profiles at the first index, and we need a length. There we go. Now this should take care of sorting this by hour and minute. And since we're now done copying this, we can tell the garbage collector that it's safe to destroy our data. The way to do that is to simply declare it as an empty array. This effectively tells the garbage collector, oh, the old data of temp we can easily destroy. So cleanup job. All right, so far so good. We still need to place a call to this method, and there are two spots where we need to do this. One of them would be, let's see, where is the property? It is right here. Whenever we assign a list to it, sort the schedule profiles by time of day, thereby done. And the other place we need to do that would be in the save button right here. And that takes care of that. Nice. We can get rid of those to-dos because task completed. Okay, so for the moment, we don't exactly have any way of accessing this particular dialog, so we should probably look into that. Before we do that, we kind of need to get rid of the editor, so let's hide that one. And since oh, actually, we should probably also do something about the new button. I completely forgot about that. Let's see, where is the editor thingy? It should be here. There we go. So this sets the group to visible, and we'll hide the new button just because we can. There we go. All right, so let's go to the main form and the schedule button and link that up with the schedule dialog. Now, there are probably a bunch of other things that we need to properly set up for this. One thing that we definitely need to do is to do a quick check to see whether a profile is actually selected or not. So we kind of need to do some of the stuff that's done here in the schedule button, but since we don't really care whether a server instance is running when we manipulate the schedules, we don't really need to do that kind of checking. If the profile selection index is greater than -1, that means our custom UI has one of the server profiles selected. At the moment, I just want to pop the schedule dialog and do a couple of schedules and then loop through the sorting code that we just wrote using the debugger so we can see exactly what's going on. So I'm not going to pass any kind of valid data as such because it's not relevant at the moment. We just need to check that this actually works. So the schedule dialog, create a new one. There we go. And then just for the sake of argument, we're not exactly going to do much more to it right now. We'll just go through and do this. And yes, we will at some point. No, actually, we don't need to do any of this. We'll just show it because we'll change, save whatever changes regardless. Dispose this. There we go. All right. This should now allow us to see the schedule dialog. We'll grab this one and it pops up. Nice. We'll do one. It says 1600. We'll do 1645, regular restart. And we didn't update the list. Dang it. So that's one thing that we definitely need to fix. All right. That would be in the save button down here somewhere. Since that would be right about here. Boom. All right. For that purpose, we have the populate schedule list box. Let's give this a try again. Schedule and try this one. There we go. And it said 00 restart. And why did it do that? Well, we'll see if we can figure out why. Now the fun begins. Exactly. Well, first of all, let's clear it so we can work with some proper data. And we'll set a breakpoint right here. This is the save button on the schedule dialog, by the way. So I'll put a breakpoint here and see what happens to it. All right, let's do this again. Grab a 1645, that should be enough. Click the save button, see what happens. Okay, so right here it says selected index on the hour is 16. On minute it says 3. 3 times 15 should be 45. So let's grab the watch and grab temp schedule and see what's inside. Okay, so it correctly saved 16. It also correctly saved 45. Now we check whether the backup check box was set. It wasn't, so we don't need to handle any of that. Server host ID equals -2, which means this is a new profile. So we'll reset that back to unassigned, like so, which was changed correctly here. And then we'll add it to the profiles array, which now has one entry containing our data as it should be. So there is either something wrong in the sort schedule or something wrong in the populate list box. I doubt it's the second one, so we made some kind of mistake in the sort. Let's go through and check that. And just to minimize this stuff, we'll keep these so we can take a look at them at some point when we need to, and then we'll add the hours and the minutes and see exactly what happens here. Okay, so first of all, we're looping through all of the individual schedule profiles. At the moment there is only one. Um, which one? This one? Oh, you mean sort schedule profiles? Which would be down here somewhere. So let's do that. I assume this is what you meant. This proves that, yeah, that's what I did right here. So something's wrong in the sorting mechanism, and we'll have to figure out exactly what that is, but to do so, we kind of need to put a breakpoint in here, and let's see if we can figure out exactly why it doesn't put those values in as it was supposed to. It makes the some of the data vanish, yes. So something in here isn't exactly or copying over the data it's the way it's supposed to. It's something that I've previously seen with structures and arrays. Sometimes, depending on circumstances, if you set things up in a certain way, it doesn't copy the entire structure as it's supposed to. So you kind of need to either create a new one in the target array and then assign the values to it that you need to get it to copy over correctly. It's the difference between whether it's actual data copying or if it's simply a reference being set up. In C and C++, you can differentiate between the two by assigning either the value or a pointer to the other value, and then the pointer becomes the reference to the original data instead. In C#, you can't exactly always specify exactly which method you want to utilize for a particular setup. So sometimes it might be beneficial to, in this case, do a new instance of this particular struct where the new instance adopts the values of the old one to avoid the reference problem. My guess would be that this is the issue right here. So instead of just assigning it like I'm doing here, I should most likely do a new instance of the structure itself on the temp array, and then assign the new setup with whatever's in the old one. And that would then correctly copy over the data instead of just doing a reference. But yeah, actually, why don't we do that right away and see if it fixes the problem. Now, since we kind of need to transfer whatever is in the old one over to the new one, we'll just do a public schedule profile, sched old profile. We'll do it like this, kind of cheaty way of doing it, but it lets us do it a little easier. Grab these, and this would then be the old profile dot server host ID, old profile dot event hour, old profile dot event minute, and old profile dot backup, and finally the old profile dot backup path. There we go. This effectively clones one structure to another. So to fix this issue, it should be enough to do a new schedule profile, passing the old one, and that should then fix the issue. Let's see if it actually does. No, it doesn't. Okay, so we have an issue in a different place. We'll see if we can actually let's put this breakpoint there again. Oh, the age-old debate. Is stuff expensive in Denmark? Everything is expensive in Denmark. That's why we are such a happy country. Well, overall, I think well, it's pretty much equal to the rest of Europe, I guess. Some things are more expensive than others, yes. Um, Compared to, I don't know, California, Denmark is most likely very expensive. Compared to, say, Spain, it's about the same. Um, kind of depends. Well, let's step through the code and see what goes on. All right, so this first part should just build up the hours array containing one entry that has 16 and the minutes array having one entry that contains 45, because that's what we set it to. So let's step down here to this point and see if these show up correctly, and they didn't. So there's something wrong with the minutes setup. Okay, so yes, of course there's something wrong. Can you spot the mistake? If I do this instead. That would be the um, 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 well, honestly, it's been years since I actually ordered a beer in a cafe anywhere in Denmark, so I don't know the current prices, to be honest, but I would imagine so, yes. We forgot to add in the check to see if we didn't find the minute mark and then adding it to the minutes array. So let's get that done. That would be the minutes and whoops, length plus 1. And then, of course, reference the last one and add in the schedule event minutes. There we go. All right, that fixes the minor oversight with the missing minutes. So let's get rid of this one up here and grab the other one instead. Yeah, you're supposed to run. There we go. Grab this one. This one is supposed to be 45. So let's see if we got them this time around. There we go. One entry in hours containing 16 and one entry in minutes containing 45. Okay, so the main reason that we ended up getting a single entry in the schedule list that had a reset, a restart time was because we couldn't match up any of the previous profiles because we had a minute entry missing. Now that I added in the code to build up the proper minutes list, it should correctly be able, it should be to be able to correctly find the previous entry and put it up in the temp list. So let's go through these quick and see if we end up getting a copy. All right, so temp, let's add that. We already have the scheduled profiles in there, so let's see. Now these two, this up, entries are identical. No backup path. They're both set, one of them is set to -1 hours. That's because we used it to sort as a reference. Um, yes, 21 megabytes of memory. That's it. The main reason it's spending so much memory is because of all the framework loading and stuff that we're doing. But then again, the smallest Hello World application uses about the same amount of memory. So, in any case, the temp array now correctly contains the entry that is set to 1645. So, by running this last line, that should copy the entire contents of temp up to the mbar schedule profiles array, like so. The red value indicates that there was a change. And that's basically it. After that, we empty out the temp array, and we're done. So let's see what happens if we add in another one, and this time we'll set it at 4:30 in the morning. I'm just gonna check to see if those breakpoints are still there. They are right there, and we'll leave the other one here. There we go. Okay, so we already have one entry at 4:45 in the afternoon, and we're adding another one at 4:30 in the morning. So let's see if our sorting mechanism actually sorts this correctly. Now, by the time we reach this point in the code, we have built up the hours and the minutes. As you can see, the first entry is 1645. The second entry is 4:30. So they are basically, I'm in the future. Oh yeah. They are showing up in the same order as they were created. So the next part of this stuff will be stepping through and seeing if it correctly identifies which of the two profiles to add in first. The first hint we will get to see if it might do this correctly or not will occur right after these two sorts have been executed. So we'll start by sorting the hours, which correctly swapped 4 and 16. Since 4 in the morning comes before 4 in the afternoon, they are now in the correct order. And the same goes for minutes. 30 minutes past the hour comes before 45 minutes past the hour, so these two should swap as well. And they are swapped. Now, in the next setup here, we are looping through the hours array, which currently contains 4 and 16, followed by looping through the minutes, which contains 30 and 45. And by the time we get to this point right here, our current selection in terms of what we need to find would be a profile that matches 4 and 30. Since h equals 0, that points to the 4 index in the hours list, and m equals 0 points to the 0 index in the minutes list. So that makes up a profile that matches 430. So let's see if we can find one of those. Loop through the stored profiles. Just for comparison, we can see that the profile at index 0 has a time setting of 1645, and the profile at index 1 has a time index of 430. So we should end up getting s equals 1 as the first one that matches. Let's see. S equals 0, it didn't match. S equals 1, and it matches. So we'll move the target index to 0, copy the profile over to the temp array, like so, and then we'll reset the event hour of this profile to -1 to make sure that it drops outside the testing range of our values, thereby indicating that we don't want to process this particular profile anymore. An alternative way would be to say kill off that entry in the array by removing it from the list to further reduce the amount of iterations through it. But then it's a cost-benefit calculation to figure out whether it's cost efficient to go through the process of removing an entry from the array versus simply stepping past that array entry when it's marked as already processed, which is basically what event hour equals -1 does. Overall, it's cheaper to leave the arrays as they are than it is to remove the entry that you already processed. And this works for processing general collection objects as well. If you need to process lists, then mark it as processed instead of deleting it when you're done processing it. It's generally faster to go through the loops if you don't manipulate the contents of the list, because then you also don't have to deal with desynchronized counters and stuff. All right, stepping on. Just for the sake of showing you, the first entry in the temp list now has the 430. The second one is still set at 00 because it's basically initialized as an empty setup. We'll step through and grab the next one. In this case, we are now looking for a profile that might have a time span that says, let's see, age equals 0, so that would be 445 to see if there's one that matches. Since we already know that such an entry doesn't exist, it'll pretty quickly loop through this, not finding any matches. And then we're done with this, so we'll step up and grab the next hour index, which would be age equals 1. Age equals 1 is the 16 hours, and then we'll go through the 30 and 45 again, like so. And here it's looking for 16 and let's see, m equals 0, so it's looking for this one, 16 and 30. There we go, and second step through, nothing matches, and the reason nothing matches is because the profile we've got left is at 1645. So we'll check the second set of minutes, which would be this one. That comes to 1645, which should match. There we go. This one has event hour set to 16. It has the event minute set to 0, just like it's showing here. So we'll add this one. And I should have stepped over that one. There we go. And now we clear the hours of this one so we don't have to process it again, and break out of the loop. And of course we are done looping through the minutes now, so we'll go through the next entry of the hours, but since we're already at 1, we're pretty much just done. There we go. So now we will copy the contents of the temp list, which is now correctly sorted for 30 and 1645. And we'll copy that back to the data that we're using throughout the form. So we now have a routine that is perfectly capable of sorting these according to time of day. Just to showcase once more, we'll do one at 12:15 and put that in here. And this time I will clear the breakpoints and we'll run through so we can see it pop on the list right away. Boom, there we go. It got inserted in the middle just as it was supposed to. Sweet. All of this is of course something that could easily be replaced by something as simple as this. So just to see how things actually work out, we'll give it a shot. And we'll need a comment here and one down here somewhere. There. And then we'll see. So we started with 1645, right? Boom. Then we did 430. Boom. Sorts correctly. And then we did a 1215. There we go. And it sorts correctly. So both of them work. Kill this one. This was 144's solution using link. There we go. So which one should we leave in? There's not much to show in terms of debugging this because this basically does exactly the same as this. It's possibly a lot more efficient than what I've built here, but at least this shows a method of sorting entries. So we'll leave this in for now, and then we will keep this in the comments section and the credit. There we go. And then we'll add in using the link method should be overall faster than the old school implementation above. There we go. Well, we can do the backup thing. That part should work. We'll do, yeah, browse here somewhere. Let's just go with Minecraft and server, and we'll find the vanilla one and do a folder here called backups. There we go. OK button, it puts the path in, and we can save it and it correctly shows backup. The one thing that doesn't work yet is the selection of schedules so we can edit them, because we haven't implemented that part yet. But that's what I plan to do next. So let's go and do that. The way to implement that aspect is to first get rid of some of this so we can get a better overview of what's going on. That would be the method that we need to call at some point. This would be the place. So we can do path as part of the list, definitely. Though it may very quickly and easily go past the width of the thingamajig. Um, well, of course we can do that. Personally, I am by no means any kind of spokesperson for using my documents on Windows systems at all. The reason for that is everybody thinks it's an excellent idea dumping everything within my documents. Which means you have multiplayer profiles for games, you have save games for games, you've got backup systems, you've got networking profiles mixed in with whatever letters you need to write to your local community or your tax office and whatnot. And all of that junk is stuffed in there. Of course, we could easily do a reasonable backup suggestion for that, which is actually why I put in this particular method and did the update last open path. See, well, that's actually a good question, Sass. Um, see, Um, back in the day when people only had one hard drive, that was in the days of, say, Windows 95. Not a lot of people back then had more than one hard drive. Back then, people were asking where to put data files and where to suggest putting data files in the development communities. And back then, people didn't really have a good answer to that question. Um, Over the years, that lack of response has led to people assuming that, oh, we will just assume that people want it in their documents folder, and then gone with that. Personally, whenever I look through my documents folder, I very quickly find 40 gigabytes of irrelevant data in there that doesn't really belong there. And that's all based on the assumption that everybody, of course, wants all of their stuff stored in my documents. Um, Today, I'm a heavy advocate for giving users the proper choice so they can choose for themselves exactly where they want to put things. But of course, you still need to suggest some logical location. For this particular setup, I actually did add in a method where we can pass the home folder for each individual server instance and use that as a suggestion to where to store these backups. Um, and the only reason it didn't show those was because I didn't implement it in the main form, which is something that I should do. So just to put that in, we will go have a look to see how we actually managed to synchronize correctly. See, this particular setup for the profile server configuration profile stuff, um, the default home folder for Windows users is actually the desktop. At least in the newer versions of Windows. I don't know why, but that's their choice. The instant you go to a networked setup, um, uh, the network server will determine where that home folder is. The C user's username is the profile folder for the logged in user. It's not the home folder. The home folder is the desktop. So that would be C user's username desktop. That's the default home folder for a non-networked user profile. Well, um, I could put it there if I really wanted to throw it on the desktop. The only reason that the current schedule dialog path selection doesn't suggest a proper folder is because I haven't transferred the uh, folder for the server profile to the schedule dialog. So when I create a new one here, it suggests the top. As you can see, it selects skrivebord, which is desktop in Danish. That's the default home folder for a non-selected path and also for profiles in default. Now I'm actually on a networked setup, which means when I'm connected to my server, my home folder is my Z drive because my home folder is redirected to the network home folder instead. To fix this particular issue, we will go through and add that setting in. See, we need to synchronize against the server host ID when we want to access a specific setup. So in here, we will grab that index and check to see if we actually found one. And if we did, then we can fetch the correct path by simply pointing to it, like so. So we shall do the dialog dot set Minecraft server path and grab it from the path property, and that should then set the path correctly. So if we go with the Railcraft one, schedule this one, do a backup, browse, it should now point correctly to where the Railcraft folder is, which is right there. So here it now pre-selects the home path of the server profile that was selected on the main form as the initial place to put the backups. Since it's probably a little bit messy throwing it in the root of the Minecraft server, well, that's why we have the button to create a new folder, so we can specify it. But just a default selection would point to the exact location of where the server instance is located. Quick and easy fix now that we have the tools available for it. Jumping back to the schedule dialog, the next button that we should implement is probably the cancel button. So since the only thing the cancel button needs to do is hide away the schedule editor and repop the new button, we'll simply do that. And while we're at it, we'll clear the selection index of the schedules just to make sure that none of them are selected. We will run into a minor problem here. That minor problem occurs when we select a specific schedule within the list here and we wanted to pop the editor for it. So we will take a quick look at how we can accomplish that. That would be the selected index changed event for the schedule list box, which is right here. To do update the selection stuff. Yes, that we most definitely will. So since this event triggers whenever the selected index actually changes, whether it goes positive to indicate a specific entry is selected, or if it goes negative to indicate no entry is selected, this event will trigger regardless. So we definitely need to figure out whether an entry was selected or if a previously selected entry was deselected. So To do that, we'll check to see what the current selected index is. If it's greater than -1, then an entry was selected, else no entries are selected. So if no entry is selected, we can actually force a cancel effect. The only thing that we need to do there is basically just hide the group and show the new button if it's deselected. So this basically gives us the shortcut of simply clearing the selected index. However, this may not work if there's nothing in the list box to begin with. So we'll just grab these two and stuff them up here, since we don't need to do nothing else. For the sake of argument, we could check whether it's actually visible or not. Doesn't really matter. We just force it hidden and the new button shown. On the other hand, if an entry is selected, then we actually need to grab a copy of whichever index was selected from the internal list and stuff it into our temporary schedule and then show the editor. And the way to do that is to simply grab the temp schedule equals new schedule profile, and since we know that this particular list box will always have the same amount of entries as our stored schedule profiles, we can actually reference this directly. So let's grab this, and that then copies this profile into our temporary profile, and then we can pop the editor. There we go. Yes, absolutely. It just involves migrating data back and forth between yet another set of forms. But other than that, yes, absolutely. More or less the same principle. So let's grab this quick and see what we can get this to work with. And it correctly pops up the vanilla, just as expected. I did create a backups folder here, so we'll select that and save this. Poof, it's gone. Now if I click the profile up here, the editor should show. Boom, there we go. Okay, let's cancel this one. That works too. One thing that we still need to implement here is the remove. We could throw in a message box asking whether the user wants to remove this profile. That's fairly simple to do. If we remove the check in the checkbox, we can no longer browse. So that's working nicely too. The text box is read-only, so we can't exactly put anything in there. Nice. All right. So, in terms of the remove button, actually there's one thing that we need to check as well. Yes, you mentioned that before, and I forgot about doing that update. So populate schedule list box right here. If it is a backup right here, we can then add in, maybe do like this, and then add in the path for it, which would be the backup path. There we go. So now it should show up nicely. Perform backup to not there, here. There we go. Save this, and it now shows where it's sending the backup to. There is one thing though. Say if I, for example, go, actually let's edit this one and set this one to 7 in the morning instead. So, oops. Now why did this happen? This most likely happened because we didn't properly initialize the host ID, and because we didn't check to see whether a selected entry in the schedule was there. So that's one of the problems that I want to address here. If we have the schedule editor open and we click a different entry, it will correctly update the pane down here. But I think it would be more beneficial if we disable the list box, so we can't do that unless we click save or cancel, or remove for that matter. So to combat that particular issue, we'll go and see if we can do something about this. Now, the benefit of simply just disabling the list box is that it A, leaves the selection visible, and B, lets us check the selected index of it to see if we have to overwrite an existing schedule entry or add a new one in the save button method. So we'll grab the edit schedule up here, and then we will simply just lock the list of schedules by disabling the list box. So this one is now disabled, and for the sake of not forgetting to synchronize all of the UI elements, we will add in another small method here that handles all of that, so we can simply call that close schedule editor. There we go. This one will then take care of updating all the relevant aspects of the UI, such as re-enabling the list box, like so, hiding away the edit frame, not enabled, I need it visible. There we go, and showing the new button. There we go. This then takes care of updating those specific things. And when we get to, let's see, that would be the save button, which would be right here. We'll put it here. There we go. Now we can easily manipulate the contents of a list box that is disabled. That's not a problem doing. What can be a problem doing is if we want to pre-select it, say by setting the selected index to some value. It can at times cause some issues. In this situation it most likely wouldn't, but it all depends on how events trigger and what aspects of the UI has been drawn and so on and so forth. So in certain events it might not work. Give it a try and see what happens. The other situation where we want to close the schedule editor is in the cancel button. So we'll put that down here as well, remove these two. And of course we also need to do it in the remove button at some point. Next part here would be exactly. The nice thing about WinForms is that if you attempt to give focus to a control that's disabled but visible, it will simply select the next one in the tab index list instead. So you can in fact focus a control that's disabled and visible. You cannot, however, always get away with giving focus to a control that is set hidden. sometimes that might cause some kind of runtime error. Um, but again, that typically only happens during the time span where a form is being shown as the graphical elements are being built and shown. Um, Whenever the form has finished loading and has already been shown, um, you can drop in a focus on a control that's invisible, and it will simply attempt to select the next one in the tab index list, just like it does with a disabled control, which is pretty neat. But if you're doing this stuff during the actual load up of the form itself, then yes, you will run into trouble. Okay. At the moment, the save button simply assumes that it has to add the profile to the list regardless. That's something we need to change. So to change that, we simply do a check on the list box to see if it has a selected index. If it does, replace the old one. Otherwise, add as a new profile. There we go. Now, since we are doing this change before we do a resort of the profiles, the selected index of the list box is still valid. So that makes it fairly easy for us to store the changes to an existing profile by simply referencing whichever entry is selected in the list box. And then we'll do the schedule profile and use the temp profile as a template for it. There we go. And this then updates it. We could then try to see if we actually have to sort if we have to go through sorting it. In any case, it would still be beneficial to sort it regardless, for the simple fact that if we choose to change the times stamp for a specific scheduled event, it could end up in a different position. So we will sort them regardless. So there we go. Let's see if we got rid of that duplication problem. There, and go down to the backups folder right there. Thank you very much. And save this one. Oh, actually I wanted this to be at 7 in the morning. So let's put that at 7 instead, and then save it, and we should see the now disabled. We can't manipulate this. We should see this getting replaced with 07 instead of 17. Boom, there we go. Sweet. If we select this and we didn't want that, we can cancel it and it reverts back. We can do another one at, say, 5:30 in the afternoon, and this is just a regular restart. So there we go. The one thing that's still missing here is the ability to remove one of them. So let's see if we can implement this one. There's a bunch of other things that we actually need to do as well, like implement configuration options so we can actually store these schedules along with the actual server profile itself. And of course also load them up. Does what work with multiple entries in the list box? Set these up again. Save this one, and we did one at 5:30, which is just a restart. This one points to the one with the backup correctly, and this one points to the regular restart correctly. and the browse button is disabled as expected. So it's working. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have much more time today. I kind of need to get some dinner started and such. So all of these additional schedule things will have to wait until next week. Um, which means at that time we need to implement the removal of schedule entries. We need to add in options so we can actually save those schedules to disk. When that's done, we need to add in features so we can yes, exactly. Um, that's the quick and dirty, easy way of getting that particular issue resolved, so we don't have to do another modal pop-up. Um, People generally don't like too many windows popping up when they're working with something, so I try to keep things within logical setups. So thanks for stopping by, Paula Bean. Appreciate all the life in the chat that you generated today. That was very entertaining and great to see. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much to everyone for joining in today. It has been absolutely awesome spending time with you guys. And I'll leave the chat open for further debates and such. Um, but other than that, thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.